Hi, I'm Bob. Welcome back to the tutorial on solving exercises from the textbook Microeconomics, Theory and Applications with Calculus, the 5th edition by Professor Jeffrey Perloff. Today, we will continue our solutions for Chapter 15, which covers factor markets. We will focus on the last 8 questions in the first section. Here's exercise 1.8. A competitive firm has a constant elasticity production function. What is its marginal revenue product of labor? For a constant elasticity production function, its marginal product of labor is as follows. In a competitive output market, the marginal revenue of output equals the market price P. The marginal revenue product of labor equals the marginal revenue of output times the marginal product of labor. Let's solve exercise 1.9. Suppose that a firm's production function is Q equals L plus K. Can it be a competitive firm? Why? Suppose the firm's production function is linear. Labor and capital are perfect substitutes. The firm uses either labor or capital, whichever is cheaper. For example, if the wage is $2 and the rental price of capital is $1, then the graph shows that the firm will spend only on capital. However, it tells nothing about the firm's size or whether it is a competitive firm. Let's go to exercise 1.10. A monopoly with a Cobb-Douglas production function faces a constant elasticity demand curve. What is its marginal revenue product of labor? For constant elasticity of substitution, CES production function, its marginal product of labor is as follows. Note that it can be simplified using Q. On the other hand, we assume the constant price elasticity demand curve is P equals A times Q to the power minus alpha. The monopoly's revenue equals P times Q. We can write the marginal revenue. Finally, the monopoly's marginal revenue product of labor equals the marginal revenue of output times the marginal product of labor. Let's find answers to exercise 1.11. How does a monopoly's demand for labor shift if a second firm enters its output market and the result is a Cournot duopoly equilibrium? Figure 15.2 in the textbook shows the labor demand curves with 3 different market structures. At a given wage, a competitive firm demands more workers than a Cournot duopoly firm, which demands more workers than a monopoly. So, the answer to this question is that the firm's labor demand curve will shift to the right as the monopoly firm becomes a duopoly firm. The labor demand curve is W equals marginal revenue times marginal product of labor. We can write the marginal revenue in terms of the market price, the output demand elasticity, and the number of firms in the market. Thus, the labor demand curve can be written as follows. For any given market price P and labor L, a duopoly firm is willing to pay a higher wage than a monopoly firm. It implies that the labor demand curve shifts to the right. Let's solve exercise 1.12. Does a shift in the supply curve of labor have a greater effect on wages if the output market is competitive or if it is monopolistic? Explain. We solve the problem in 2 steps. In the first step, we examine the effect of a shift in the labor supply curve on wages. In the second step, we compare the shapes of the labor demand curves for a competitive output market and a monopolistic output market. First, the graphs show that an identical shift in the labor supply curve has a greater effect on wages if the labor demand curve is steeper or less elastic. In the second step, we determine how the output market structure affects the labor demand elasticity, or the shape of the labor demand curve. Figure 15.2 in the textbook shows that the labor demand curve is steeper for the monopoly output structure than the competitive market structure. The reason is that if the output market is competitive, the change in the quantity of output changes the market price very little or even does not affect the output price. By contrast, if the output market is monopolistic, the change in the output quantity has a larger effect on the output price. Suppose the firm employs more workers. It has 2 effects in a monopolistic output market. On the one hand, it produces more outputs. The output price falls in a monopolistic output market. On the other hand, more workers means a lower marginal product of labor. These 2 effects reinforce each other. By contrast, there's only one effect if the firm hires more workers in a competitive output market. The marginal product of labor falls. By the labor demand function, we know that the firm is willing to pay a lower wage in a monopolistic output market than in a competitive output market. That is, the labor demand curve is steeper if the output market is monopolistic. Based on the above 2 steps, a shift in the labor supply curve has a greater effect on wages if the output market is monopolistic. Let's go to exercise 1.13. What is a monopoly's demand for labor if it uses a fixed proportions production function in which each unit of output takes 1 unit of labor and 1 unit of capital? The labor demand curve describes the units of labor a firm is willing to employ at every given level of wage, holding other factors constant. Or, equivalently, it shows the maximum wage the firm is willing to pay for every given level of labor employed, other things being equal. In the short run, the capital is fixed, And the monopoly firm's labor demand curve is W equals marginal revenue of product times marginal product of labor. We focus on the marginal product of labor. For a fixed proportion production function, the efficient points of production lie on the 45-degree line, where the firm uses an equal quantity of both inputs. If the labor is less than the fixed input capital, one more unit of labor results in one more unit of output until the two inputs are equal. So the marginal product of labor is 1, and the labor demand function is W equals the marginal revenue. Another case is when the labor is greater than or equal to the fixed input capital. In this case, the increase in labor will not increase any output, and the marginal product of labor equals 0. The labor demand curve is W equals 0. The labor demand curve is depicted in the graph. Let's solve exercise 1.14. In solved problem 15.2, show how the results change if the share of workers killed by the Black Death was 1/2. The production function is Q equals L to the power 0.5 times K to the power 0.5. 100 units of labor and 100 units of capital are used. The output market is competitive and the price is normalized to 1. The question is, if the number of workers falls by half, what happens to the output, the wage, and the rental price of capital? We solve it in 3 steps. In the first step, we show how the output falls due to a reduction in labor. When labor falls from 100 units to 50 units, the output falls from 100 to 70.7. In the second step, we show the increase in the marginal product of labor and wage. The marginal product of labor increases from 0.5 to 0.71. Because the labor demand function is W equals price times marginal product of labor, the wage increases from 0.5 to 0.71. In the third step, we show the decrease in the marginal product of capital and the rental price of capital. The marginal product of capital falls from 0.5 to 0.35, and so is the rental price of capital. Let's answer exercise 1.15. An economic consultant explaining the effect on labor demand of increasing healthcare costs says that it isn't only current medical costs, but also the present value of the stream of endlessly high cost increases that retards hiring. For part A, why does the present value of the stream of healthcare costs and not just the current healthcare costs affect a firm's decision whether to create a new position? In part B, why should an employer discount future health care costs when deciding whether to create a new position? The labor demand curve shows that a higher marginal cost of labor reduces the demand for labor. The marginal cost of labor includes wages and other costs, such as healthcare. Since the firm pays the healthcare cost for the workers over time, even if the workers reduce their work hours. Part of future healthcare expenditures should be considered today. The present value of the future costs should be used when the firm makes a decision today. Thank you for watching this video and subscribing to my YouTube channel. See you next time.